Isolation for the rare mind is rarely about absence of people. It is the quiet ache of being unseen in the very midst of a crowd. For INFJs, this dissonance is sharper because their inner landscapes are so alive, yet invisible to most. Aristotle once reminded us that humans are political animals, meant to belong to a shared polis. But for some of us, belonging feels conditional, like an invitation never sent. I have walked through noisy halls feeling like a ghost. Everyone spoke, yet no one touched the center of my being. The irony is clear. I was surrounded, but still alone. And the more unseen I felt, the more my silence thickened into a private exile. Sometimes, it just hurts. Here lies the paradox. INFJs do not heal isolation by multiplying contacts. Endless exposure with no resonance is just another layer of fatigue. What we need is not volume, but deliberate circles, spaces where inner truth can breathe. INTJs, on the other hand, find their freedom not in broad networks, but in precise alliances that ignite their projects. For both, connection is not about numbers, but about alignment with essence. Yet a warning is needed. Solitude can seduce. It whispers that withdrawal is proof of depth, that mystery equals value. But mystery without bridge becomes arrogance disguised as purity. I once believed silence made me stronger, but in truth, it made me brittle. To romanticize isolation is to confuse the chrysalis with the butterfly. One is only meant to hold you for a time. So the first practice is simple, though not easy. Name the weight. Write or whisper aloud where you feel unseen, and then choose one deliberate step toward a circle that can contain you. For the INFJ, it may be initiating a conversation that risks honesty. For the INTJ, it may be inviting critique into a plan before its unveiling. The polis may be small, but it is not optional. Without it, the rare mind risks mistaking its own silence for destiny. And I wonder, what happens when the walls we build to survive become the very walls that imprison us? Isolation does not always begin with rejection. Sometimes it begins with fog. Thoughts swirl, untested, until they become cages of their own making. We tell ourselves, they will not understand me, or I must stay apart to stay whole. These are not always lies, but they are rarely tested against the sharp edge of reason. In that blur, isolation thickens. Aristotle's gift was not only grand metaphysics, but a discipline for clearing confusion. Logic, at its heart, is a mirror that reveals contradiction. It is a practice that says, if two beliefs collide, one must yield. By shining form over feeling, logic dissolves the haze where isolation thrives. I have caught myself in loops of circular reasoning, rehearsing feelings as if they were conclusions. Only when I laid them against syllogism, premise, conclusion, did the loop break. That moment felt like air returning to a sealed room. For the INFJ, this discipline matters deeply. Feelings carry wisdom, but without rational form, they risk becoming labyrinths with no exit. The practice is this: take one strong feeling and test it. Does it follow from reality, or only from wounded memory? When feeling passes through form, clarity returns. For the INTJ, the mirror is different but parallel. Strategies must be tested against first principles, not mere assumptions. Projects collapse when built on sand, no matter how precise the architecture. I want to know, what's the one belief that most keeps you apart from others? Write it in the comments like a stone you're putting on the table for us to examine together. When you name it publicly, you begin to loosen its grip, and maybe someone else will find freedom in your courage. And here comes a rule, firm but liberating. Reject any argument, internal or external, that cannot endure a basic syllogism. If the reasoning crumbles at its foundation, it does not deserve the weight of your solitude. Sometimes, the key to freedom is not in louder connection but in cleaner thought. One line remains with me tonight. I am freer when my mind obeys truth rather than shadows. The deepest prison is not built by society but by belief. A quiet thought repeats, if I am different, I must remain apart. It feels noble, almost protective, yet it coils around the soul until difference hardens into distance. For the rare mind, this thought is seductive because it disguises exile as integrity. Aristotle challenged this illusion by teaching that identity is not an essence we guard in silence, but a pattern we shape through habits. Who we are is not frozen. It is sculpted, one act at a time. If I isolate in the name of authenticity, I forget that authenticity itself is forged in the fire of shared life. I remember once believing that no one could understand the weight of my inner world. I kept my silence as a shield, but the silence grew heavier than the fear it was meant to protect. For INFJs, the counter move is not grand disclosure but small steps of trust. One sentence spoken in a circle where meaning is safe. For INTJs, the work is different. To refine identity not by hiding in private systems, but by iterating plans in dialogue, letting friction sharpen what solitude can only sketch. The guardrail is essential. Do not build a private self that no one can test. An unexamined identity rots into fantasy. The rare mind requires the polis not for approval, but for calibration. Without dialogue, even the purest vision bends inward and loses shape. So the practice is this. Take one hidden belief about your difference and expose it to the light. Ask someone you trust if it holds truth or only fear. If they name cracks, let them stand. Sometimes freedom is not discovered alone but confirmed by another voice. Who are we, if not creatures whose very essence demands both solitude and witness? Too much silence becomes a prison, yet too much exposure becomes a scattering. Both extremes drain the rare mind of its power. What is needed is not withdrawal into endless solitude, nor dissolution into constant noise, but a middle path, a rhythm that keeps the soul intact while still letting it breathe. Aristotle called this rhythm the mean, virtue as the balance between excess and deficiency. For silence, the excess is isolation. For speech, the excess is noise. The rare mind flourishes when it learns to step back and lean in with timing, not with extremes. I have felt both errors. Days of silence where I vanished into thought until even my voice felt foreign in my own mouth. Then other times, giving too much, speaking too openly, leaving conversations hollow because I had poured myself out without care. In both states, I lost myself. For INFJs, the practice is simple but steady. Alternate reflection with one honest conversation each week. Not many, just one that cuts through appearances. For INTJs, the balance comes by alternating private planning with external. Critique before execution. A project shielded from challenge too long warps in hidden ways. And here is a rule to carve into memory. If you hide for more than 3 days, step out once. No matter how incomplete, no matter how weary, re-enter the polis in some small way. A single voice exchanged in truth restores proportion. The sound of rain against my window tonight reminds me of this rhythm. Each drop falling, retreating, then falling again. Is that not what we are called to learn? To breathe. In silence, to breathe out connection, and to let the cycle keep us whole? The rare mind often confuses distance with strength. Withdrawal feels like sovereignty, a high tower untouched by noise. Yet over time, distance does not harden into power, it softens into weakness. Alone too long, even clarity dissolves into self-echo. Aristotle drew a different path. True power, he wrote, comes from knowing causes and ends. Strength is not the silence of the unreachable, but the lucidity of one who sees purpose and moves toward it. Authority is not gained by mystery, it is gained by clarity. I once mistook my distance for control. I thought mystery made me untouchable, but I learned that the longer I hid, the less my words carried weight. Trust decayed, and with it the influence I hoped to preserve. Here we don't glorify endless solitude or cheap noise. We look for the mean Aristotle spoke of, that living balance between silence and connection. If you want that kind of compass each week, subscribe. Every video here is one more step to keep your rare mind from drifting into fog. For INFJs, the practice begins with writing purpose before speaking it. Clarity written becomes clarity shared. For INTJs, the step is to define outcome metrics before investing energy. To labor without measure is to labor in fog. And for both, the danger is the same, confusing the aura of mystery with the substance of truth. Here lies a guardrail. Never equate mystery with authority. Authority built on distance is a fragile throne ready to collapse when tested. Power that endures is born from vision embodied, visible, tangible, tested in the polis. So the practice is this. Declare your clarity before you declare your distance. Let purpose speak louder than withdrawal. Then when you step back into solitude, it will not be an escape, but a wellspring. And I ask myself, what weighs more in the end? The echo of a hidden figure, or the presence of one who walked among us with eyes unclouded. Isolation grows thickest when days lose their form. The rare mind drifts when thought has no rhythm, when reflection is left unshaped. Time itself becomes a fog, and in that fog, solitude turns from sanctuary to suffocation. Aristotle insisted that virtue is not a sudden blaze but a habit kindled daily. Rational action, repeated, sculpts character until it holds steady even in storm. The mind that lacks practice bends to mood. The mind disciplined by reason learns to stand. I remember mornings when I let thought spiral unchecked until hours passed in a haze of speculation. Only when I introduced form, a page, a limit, a test, did my day sharpen. One rule changed everything. I gave my mind rails to run on, instead of letting it scatter. For INFJs, the practice is to journal one paradox or conflict each day, not to solve it fully, but to hold it in light. Clarity comes in naming what resists clarity. For INTJs, the practice shifts to the structural. Keep a living checklist of reasoning, errors to avoid, assumptions, false generalizations, leaps without cause. Over time, awareness of these patterns becomes a shield against self-deception. And then the rule, both simple and fierce. Stop analysis after 15 minutes. Once the test is passed, once the thought endures logic, act. Endless delay is not wisdom. It is fear disguised. Sometimes I close my notebook and feel the weight lift, not because the problem is gone, but because form has been given to chaos. What else is discipline, if not the daily re-entry into reason, where freedom slowly takes shape? Walls of isolation rarely announce themselves. They appear as unquestioned thoughts, subtle convictions that whisper why we cannot belong. The rare mind often accepts these whispers as truth, forgetting that thought itself must be tested. Here the Socratic way becomes a torch. Ask, name, test, expose. The first question is simple. What thought keeps me out of the polis? Write it down. Name it clearly. Then the second, is this thought reason or fear? In naming and testing, shadows lose their weight. A wall cannot stand once its stones are revealed. I have asked myself this question in late hours, candlelight flickering on my desk. The silence felt heavy, but the moment I spoke the thought aloud, its power thinned. Fear feeds on secrecy. Reason thrives on exposure. For INFJs, the practice is to take one fear and rewrite it as a hypothesis to test socially. Instead of, they will reject me, write, if I share this truth, one person will understand. For INTJs, the practice is to take one bias and frame it as an experiment to test logically. Instead of, this system will fail, write, if this system fails at step 2, it must be redesigned. The guardrail is uncompromising. No belief is immune from examination, not even the cherished ones that feel like anchors. If they are true, they will survive testing. If not, they were never anchors but chains. So the rare mind must ask again and again, which of my thoughts are walls and which are doors waiting to be opened? Exile is not always chosen. It is often reinforced by the wrong circles. To stand among those who drain clarity is to feel more alone than in solitude. The rare mind cannot flourish in an echo chamber of noise or status games. Belonging is not about proximity. It is about alignment. Aristotle taught that flourishing requires a polis ordered toward telos, toward ends worthy of our nature. To be among people whose vision is hollow is to lose sight of our own. Community is not neutral. It shapes destiny. When I shared how silence once made me brittle instead of strong, did that resonate with you? If it did, tap the like button now. It tells me this isn't just theory. It's hitting where it matters, and I'll keep bringing practices that give clarity instead of just abstract comfort. I once stayed in a circle that prized image over meaning. Each gathering left me emptier, yet I told myself it was better than being alone. In truth, it was not. The wrong polis deepens exile more than solitude ever could. For INFJs, the path is to seek one or two allies who value meaning above status, souls who would rather speak truth than trade applause. For INTJs, the same rule applies, but with a shift. Seek one or two allies who value systems over noise, who refine projects rather than scatter them. Such companions are not many, but they are enough. And here a rule must stand like stone. Never remain in a group that drains. Clarity week after week. If the well grows murkier the longer you drink, it is not your well. Step out. The night air carries the scent of wood smoke as I write this, reminding me that the right fire warms and the wrong fire suffocates. Which circles burn away your strength and which kindle it into flame. Clarity, when left hidden, decays into abstraction. The rare mind may see deeply, reason cleanly, even resolve inner conflicts, but if the insight never becomes visible, it loses its weight. Pain lingers when truth is locked inside. The world cannot touch what we refuse to embody. Aristotle taught that logos, reasoned speech, without ethos, embodied character, holds no persuasive force. Ideas float unless tethered to visible form. To live unseen convictions is to let truth vanish into private mist. I have carried insights for years that no one around me could feel. They glowed brightly in solitude, but because they remained hidden, they died in me, unshared. When I finally acted on them, one habit, one word spoken, they became flesh and others could meet me there. For INFJs, the practice is to embody values through micro-habits others can witness. Kindness that leaves a trace, discipline that shows in rhythm, not just intent. For INTJs, the step is to let systems speak by results others can measure. An improved process, a tested model, a plan that breathes beyond theory. Here lies the guardrail. Stop theorizing if no one around you can observe the shift. The unembodied. Truth is not a truth fulfilled. It remains only a promise. And I ask myself, what power is greater, to hold a vision unseen, or to let it walk in the open, where even silence bears witness? Freedom is not built in grand gestures, but in steady patterns. What we choose to keep, what we dare to stop, what we finally begin. The rare mind often hoards habits that feel protective, yet these same habits reinforce the very isolation we seek to escape. Liberation requires discernment, not mere intensity. To keep is to honor practices that sharpen clarity. Journaling, for instance, cuts through self-deception when the fog grows dense. Writing syllogisms, mapping paradoxes, tracing contradictions. These are not indulgences, but tools of freedom. They remind us that thought can be tested and truth can be known. To stop is to renounce the subtle poisons. Chief among them, using isolation as armor, treating solitude as proof of depth. I know this temptation well. I once believed my silence was evidence of wisdom, when in truth it was only fear dressed in noble clothes. To start is to risk new forms of disclosure, not reckless exposure, but rational openness within chosen circles. INFJs must learn to pair compassion with clarity, for empathy unguided can drown in sentiment. INTJs must learn to pair drive with dialogue, for strategies untested collapse under their own weight. Think of someone who's been hiding behind the idea that mystery equals value, the way I once did. Share this video with them. You might be handing them the bridge out of exile. Sometimes the right word at the right moment cracks a wall they thought was permanent. I pause here, staring at the faint glow of my lamp. The room is still, yet I feel the shift. Freedom is not found in hiding, nor in shouting, but in deliberate rhythm. Keep, stop, start. 3 steps, repeated daily, until the walls of exile fall. And perhaps the truest question lingers still. If logic can free us from hidden isolation, will we dare to let it reshape the way we live?